The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Oh, if Joe Gibbs were still coaching the Washington football team, he would be apoplectic. The wife of owner Josh Harris, Marjorie Harris, declared that the Commanders are the new America's team. Gibbs didn't like that. I'm not so sure how Dan Quinn will react to it. I don't think he's going to have a problem with it. But a little bit early, I would say, for that kind of declaration and bulletin board material for the team that has been America's team for nearly 50 years. Whether they win or not, they're America's team. And the Dallas Cowboys draw eyeballs to the television set. It appears that the network officials believe that Jaden Daniels and the Commanders will draw eyeballs to the television set, and I'm sure that they will. But I would say a year in, a year removed from a 4-win season, a little bit early to do that. We'll get to that and more coming up at 10 o'clock. Also, George Wendt has passed away, probably best known as Norm from Cheers, but he was part of the super fans. The Bears, and I think in a sports sense, he will live on in that way. Also, it was 35 years ago today that we had the greatest ending in the history of television for a series, bar none. The last Newhart show, which aired on this day in 1990, to this day, in my mind, stands up as the greatest series ending ever. And what a clever way to end that series. We'll get to that more coming up in the hour. We start off the Western Conference Finals last night, and I don't think we expected a blowout, and it was a blowout. Oklahoma City over Minnesota, 114, to 88. And the second half was no contest as Oklahoma City scored 70 points to Minnesota's 40, and Anthony Edwards is playing on a bad ankle. He's going to gut it out, I'm sure, but how effective he's going to be, we'll have to see. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's likely to be the MVP, had a rough shooting night. He was 10 of 27, 0 for 4 from 3, but he did something that is kind of novel in today's game. He hit mid-range jump shots. Glory be, mid-range jump shots. Haven't seen those in a long, long time. Keep shooting threes. Doesn't matter how many you miss, just keep shooting threes. Well, he only shot 4 of them, missed all of them in a tough shooting night, but found a way to get inside the paint and hit those mid-range jump shots. Tim Legler analyzing the blowout last night on ESPN.
He only had 2 mid-range jump shots in the entire first half, and he went 2 for 13. He comes out to start the third quarter, and this is the one he wants right there. He goes full speed. Nobody stops on a dime the way Shai Gilgeous-Alexander does. He gets that little lean-back jumper. He was also aggressive here, as you could see him around the rim, that time with his own putback. But this is the shot that has defined Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's season and really the last several seasons for him. It's that 18 to 20-foot jump shot off the dribble in a one-on-one setting, and he was able to get to that. And I thought it calmed his team down. When you start to see your best player operate with efficiency, everybody starts to calm down, and then they stay in their lane, and then Oklahoma City's defense took over.
Because he wasn't shooting well in the first half.
Right.
He only had 11 points in the first half. It wasn't just their offense, though, in the second half. If you think about the defense, they calmed Julius Randle. And then, of course, in the fourth quarter, we'll get to a little bit more of Anthony Edwards, but at the end of the day, he had 0 points. So when you look at what the defense was able to do for OKC, what impressed you the most?
You know, think about what OKC did this year as a team. These things shouldn't go together. Number one, in defending the three-point line, while defending the paint at the highest level. Like, those two things shouldn't go together. And also giving up the fewest points in transition. That's what this team is defensively. That's their identity. And you saw that on full display in the second half. Outscored them 70-40 in the second half. And this defense swarming, picking up every 50-50 ball. The activity with their hands. And I just thought they made Minnesota's life miserable. Minnesota took 50 three-point shots in this game, almost twice as many as two-point shots. That's not who they are as a team. And Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, and Anthony Edwards, of course, not able to get anything in the paint at all. Not enough balance in their offense.
Just real quick, what's your level of concern when it comes to Ant's ankle?
Very, because when this game was still within reach, 10, 12-point game in the fourth quarter, Anthony Edwards has erased those deficits by himself. He could not get to that shot going left where he pushes off his right foot to get separation. This is the play he hurts it. I believe it was the first quarter. The entire second half, he did not take any jump shots going to his left, which requires you to push off on your right foot. He might not say it after the game. He might want to ignore it. I think it's a factor. At least in this game, it was. His aggressiveness was taken away from him from that point on. It's not an excuse. OKC played great. They dominated in the second half, but it was a factor. You can't deny it. He'll have 48 hours to figure it out for game 2.
And that's going to be a major story because if Anthony Edwards is not healthy, I don't see any way that Minnesota gets back into this series. And even if he is healthy, at least from the jump, Oklahoma City looks like the much better team. Tonight we got the Eastern Finals getting started in New York, Pacers and the Knicks. It would be very, very good for the NBA if the Knicks win. My friend Mark Boyle has been doing the Pacer games for 36, 37 years, something like that, and has never been a part of a championship team. Would like to see him do it, but I'm sure the league would like to see the Knicks win. And if there are some controversial calls, get ready for all the conspiracy theories that are going to follow. But here we go. Every night there's going to be a game. Tonight East, tomorrow West, back and forth until they're over with, and we will find out who plays in the finals. So NFL, this is this big day, pretty big day, not a huge day, but got the owners' meetings going on in Minneapolis, and they're going to vote on the tush push. And this was a proposal that was first brought up by the Green Bay Packers, and it's since been tweaked a little bit in that they are basically saying, go back to the rule that you used to have back into 2006, where if you aided the runner, it was a penalty. And since they had such a hard time calling it, they said, the heck with it. It's going to be legal. And it took a while for the Philadelphia Eagles to go, whoa, wait a minute. If you can aid the runner, let's do that. And we got a quarterback who can squat 600 pounds. Let's get behind him and push, and we'll push it into the end zone. Well, the Packers would like to do away with it, and so would I, because it doesn't look like football to me. But there is obvious pushback, no pun intended, from the Philadelphia Eagles and maybe the Buffalo Bills, who use it frequently themselves with a massively big quarterback. So this was Albert Breer yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, explaining the Eagles' position on this and why they would like, obviously, to keep it in the game.
They've been pretty aggressive in fighting it. Howie Roseman stood up at the owners' meeting in March and basically said, if you say this is such a dangerous play, I want to see the injury data. And there really isn't injury data. And what the chief medical officer of the NFL said to the room was, we haven't had major injuries, but when we have one based on the posture of the quarterback on this play, it's going to be catastrophic. And it's interesting because that's one argument. And then teams that are for banning it, it's a different argument. It's not a football play. It's a rugby play. So, the Eagles have been steadfast in feeling like they're being targeted here, and feeling like this is only an issue because they've gotten so good at it, and they think it's a bad precedent for the league to set when one team gets really good at one thing and it's deemed unfair that now you can, find a way to get it taken out of the game. At the same time, if you go back to 2004, there was a rule in the books that prevented all pushing and pulling of offensive teammates, and that got repealed for reasons that had nothing to do with what Philly's doing. The reason why was because downfield blocks had become harder to officiate, and delineating whether or not an offensive player was blocking a defender or pushing his own teammate across a line to gain, a goal line, whatever. So it's complicated. There's a lot that's going into it. Again, the Eagles were vocal in March, and they've certainly, been on the phones over the last few days too, and trying to make their case to other teams that'll be voting tomorrow.
My mistake today. My mistake on the year was 2004. This has been out of the league for 20 years that you couldn't aid the runner. Because remember this, it's a big deal when the Notre Dame team almost beat USC with Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush, and Leinart scored on a quarterback sneak, and it looked like Reggie Bush pushed him from behind, the Bush push, and there was a lot of screaming and yelling at Notre Dame about that. And Charlie Weiss, off that loss, got himself a long-term contract at Notre Dame because he was threatening to go to the NFL. What a mistake. He was a complete disaster at Notre Dame. And so, that play may have changed the fortunes of Notre Dame for a while after that mess. Frankie Louvu, if in fact this tush push is outlawed today, I think we're going to look at what Frankie Louvu did in the championship game in Philadelphia as something that, no pun intended, pushed it past the line. Louvu, as you remember, kept jumping over the line of scrimmage. They kept calling penalties, and eventually they said, hey, if you do this again, we may just award Philadelphia a touchdown. We can do that. Louvu, unlike his coach, because Dan Quinn was asked about this, Dan Quinn said, no, don't outlaw it. We're going to try and work on continuing to try and stop it. Louvu has, as he was appearing the other day on Good Morning Football, has a differing opinion.
Yeah, I think they should ban it. You know what I mean? But I know the argument is going to be about like, hey, you guys have to stop it. Don't get us in short yardage and whatnot. But
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like a Chico play, man. You got Jordan Mailata on the right. You got, it's pretty much a scrum in rugby. That's how I kind of look at it. And we got to have a scrum too on the other side. And the scrum is, we have a cadence where we all go at once. It's not like you hard count and this and that where, now you getting us or myself jumping over the pile thinking that they're about to snap the ball. And that's just my own personal opinion, and I'm going to leave it at that.
I'd agree with that. I would agree with what Frankie Louvu said there. I think that they should outlaw it, and it does not look like football to me. But we'll get the vote later today. They're also going to vote on a playoff alignment in that you don't necessarily have to win the division to get a home playoff game. And I don't think that's going to pass. I don't think there's enough support for that. And I remember this. The New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl, would have been February 2010. And the following year, they won like 11 games, but they didn't win the division. And they had to go on the road to play a 7-9 Seattle team, and they lost. And I remember we had Drew Brees on during the following Super Bowl to talk about it. I think that was the one that Aaron Rodgers won in Dallas, and he said, no, it's fair. I was trying to get him riled up. Isn't it unfair? You won 11 games, and you got to go play a 7-win team on the road. He said, no, it sometimes just works out that way, thinking, maybe one day down the road we'll win 7 and get a home playoff game. So I don't think that's going to pass. But the tush push could go, and I would be happy to see it go. Yesterday, if you missed this, the NFL owners did approve their players participating in flag football in the Olympics. And the NFL is all about selling the game internationally. I would say this. If they're looking for this to have an effect like the Dream Team had for the NBA in 1992, forget about it, because it's not football. It's flag football, and it's vastly different. Not only that, you're only going to have 10 players participate, and Jaden Daniels would be perfect for this. But if you're a fan of the Commanders or if you're a fan of football, do you really want Jaden Daniels in this game? I know there's a small risk of injury. He's not getting hit, but you can have a non-contact injury. You could tear an ACL. You can tear an Achilles. It's unlikely. But as I've talked about before, this goes back 20 years or so when the NFL was still playing the Pro Bowl and playing it in Honolulu. They had a rookie flag football game on the beach, and Robert Edwards, who had a 1,000-yard season for the New England Patriots, really ripped up his knee and made it back briefly with the Dolphins and played in the Canadian League, but it essentially ended his career. You want that in something like this? And I would say this about anybody from the NFL who does participate in this, and the NFL wants it. They want it to happen. I would say Because, unlike in the NBA where you have players participating in the Olympics, they have guaranteed contracts. If in the NFL, you don't. So if you hurt yourself playing flag football in the Olympics, and this is not going to be till 2028 in Los Angeles, that you ought to have your contract guaranteed because you are participating in something that the NFL has checked off on. It's not an official NFL game, and if you get hurt in an NFL game and your contract is not guaranteed, and most of them are not, they don't have to pay you. And I would say that any player who participates in this should have their contract guaranteed. And what's interesting about the year 2028 is by that time, I would think that there would be a long-term extension in place for Jaden Daniels. That's how many more years? So he's got 2025 will be the second year, 2026 will be the third, and he would have a new contract for sure going into that season. That would only take place a couple of weeks before training camp. This would be in mid-July, and I would think that they get it out of the way in the first week. The rules are it is going to be a field that is 70 by 25. So it's 70 yards long with end zones of 10 yards each on either end and then 25 yards wide. It's 40-minute games, 2 20-minute halves, including the 2-minute warning, 4 downs to get to midfield and 4 downs to score a touchdown. No running plays within 5 yards of the end zone. Well, that takes away a lot of what Jaden Daniels does. So if you're at the 5-yard line, you have to throw a pass into the end zone. There are only 6 positions, 3 on offense, 3 on defense. Quarterback, who can only run past the line of scrimmage after first handing the ball off and receiving a lateral or going out for a pass. So once again, naked bootleg, whatever he wants to run, can't do that. He has to get the ball back after first handing the ball off and then that player crossing the line of scrimmage and lateraling it back. The center can go out for a pass, so it's just like you play in the schoolyard or at the park. There is the wide receiver / back who can line up either as a standard running back or wide receiver. Only 3 positions on defense, a rusher. That's why they're talking about Micah Parsons possibly playing in this. But he, instead of counting Mississippis or alligators, he'll be 7 yards off the line of scrimmage. Defensive back essentially functions as a traditional cornerback, and then the safety who looks for the pass over the run. So that's what's in place. Now, they some have projected who might play in this. Daniels would obviously be a choice. He's 27. He'll be 27 when this game takes place. Jahmyr Gibbs from the Lions, he'd be 26. These are all speed guys. Justin Jefferson, he's the ambassador, and he was really happy about this when this announcement came out. He didn't say necessarily whether he would play, but he said, quote, "I'm just at a loss for words. Just to think about the chances of playing in the Olympics and getting a gold medal is a dream. Just reverting back to being a kid and watching the track and field meets, watching basketball, winning the gold medal." So he's intrigued by the Olympics, as I'm sure a lot of them would be. But when push comes to shove, would they go out there and play and risk injury? Travis Hunter would obviously be a natural then. He'd only be 25 years old. Derek Stingley Jr. from the Texans, 26. These are all guys who would be in their mid-20s participating in this. Although, once you get to the point of this and it's a decision whether to play or not, and if they don't get the kind of things that they're looking for from the league, like guaranteed contracts, might you see some retired players participate in this? And who's going to be running to the front of the line? Robert Griffin III. He's going to be old now. He's going to be in his, He's now, 30-something? So he'd be late 30s then. Be in his late 30s, like 38, something like that, 38 when that game is taking place. So we'll see. But that's fun and games from the NFL, and if they're looking for the dream team effect, I think they're going to be rather disappointed. And again, it's only 10 guys. It's only going to be 10 guys who participate in this flag football in 2028. Coming up, the passing of George Wendt brings back not only memories of Cheers, but Go Bears! We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
George Wendt died yesterday at the age of 76. Ironically, on the 32nd anniversary of the last episode of Cheers, in which he had one of the last lines in the show. The last line obviously went to the star of the show, Ted Danson, as Sam Malone as he shut down the bar and walked out the door. But he is also known for the skits on Saturday Night Live, the Bears. So there's kind of a sports connection here. And I have no doubt that George Wendt was a true Chicago Bears fan, because in 1986, January of 86, when I was covering the Super Bowl for UPI, I wound up at an NBC party. I'm not sure why. In those days, it was easier to get into the big parties, and I got an invitation somehow, and I'm at this party, and there's a lot of NBC stars there. Really, surprising. Michael J. Fox, who was an enormous star then, was there, and other NBC people. And, of course, Cheers at that time had established itself as one of the top shows on television on NBC. Sitcoms were still big back in those days. And so he was there, and I was in my late 20s and admittedly a schmuck, because his name was George Wendt, and at that point, an accomplished actor. And I went, "Hey, Norm," as if he'd never heard that before. So all these years later, I feel stupid in doing it, but there's a lot of things, I guess, in my life that I've done that I feel stupid about, and that was certainly one of them. But as the Bears were becoming this powerhouse team in 1985, there was a skit on Saturday Night Live where you had the Bears superfans sitting around a table. I think it was supposed to be a talk show, but I don't know if I don't necessarily remember microphones in front of them. But they were sitting around talking about how great the Bears were. And the lead guy, his name was Swirsky. The lead guy was Joe Mantegna, who's a pretty well-established actor and a Chicago guy. And this was the original Superfans, which aired on Saturday Night Live 40 years ago.
Good afternoon, my friends, and welcome to Bill Swirsky Superfans. I'm Bill Swirsky, and with me, as always, are the Superfans, Pat Arnold. Hey, Bill. Todd O'Connor.
Bill.
And Carl Walarski.
How you doing, Bill?
All right, we're talking here live from Ditka's on the heart of Chicago, Illinois, the city of the big shoulders, and home, of course, to a certain football team which has carved out a special place in the pantheon of professional football greats. That team which is known the world over as the Bears.
The Bears. Everybody was saying that 40 years ago. This was the creation of a writer on Saturday Night Live. He was actually from New York, but has spent a lot of time in Chicago. His name is Robert Smigel, and several years ago on the Rich Eisen show, he explained coming up with that skit and then what they were going to do for subsequent hits when they found out that this one was such a hit.
So we tried it, and it did amazing. But again, then I thought, that's it. We did it once. Joe Mantegna was the host. Then this local radio host, Jonathan Brandmeier, in Chicago, just kept playing the sketch over and over. And then he made the Bulls a catchphrase, because the Bulls that was Michael Jordan's first year.
That was it.
The championship year, 1991. And so by May, George Wendt came to host, and we're like, okay, let's do it again. And then
you got Mantegna back for that.
No,
too?
Mantegna only did it like one more time.
Okay.
Then George did it that time. I'm subbing in for my brother Bill, who's had another heart attack. And then George was the one who kept wanting to come back. Mantegna was doing like David Mamet movies at the time. He was like, it was great. I had a good time, guys. But George was like, yeah, I'm a comedian.
Yeah, and he was great at this. So this was George Wendt as the brother in the Superfan skit.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky's Superfans. I'm Bob Swirsky, sitting in for my brother Bill, who's still recovering from that dreadful heart attack. With me, as always, are the Superfans, Pat Arnold.
Hey, Bob.
Carl Walarski.
Hey, Bob.
And Todd O'Connor.
How are you, Bob?
Real good. Real good. Once again, we're coming to you from Ditka's Restaurant in the heart of Chicago, the city of the big shoulders, home to a certain team which come January will run roughshod over the competition in Super Bowl 26, a team that is known as the Bears.
The Bears.
Why are we so blessed?
Well, we'll get to that later, Todd. First off, We're getting ready to enjoy today's basketball game, folks, in which the Detroit Pistons are going to run into a certain team from a certain town known for its Polish sausage and soon to be known as the home of the Bulls. The Bulls. Okay, some predictions from the sports fans on today's game. Pat?
Bulls, 149-23.
Carl?
Bulls 149-52.
Okay, some difference of opinion there between you guys. Todd?
Bulls 402-0.
Okay. Okay.
But Michael Jordan will be held to under 200 points.
Todd, 100 points is the record.
Was.
Doubles. Doubles. All right.
The Bulls. That's Chris Farley with the last part there. And Farley at some points in these skits would pound his chest like he was having a heart attack. And you saw these big Polish sausages in front of them and the chaps and the beer and all that. It was just so good for the time. And Wendt was perfect for that. Actually, probably better than Montaigne. I thought his Chicago accent was better. And in my mind, George Wendt is more memorable in that role. But, of course, the most memorable role of his career was playing Norm on Cheers. For 6 straight years, he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series, 84 to 89 for Emmys. I don't think he won. The show won a bunch of Emmys. And, like a lot of things in life, they come along and you don't expect them to turn out the way that they did. And he had been, successful in Second City TV stuff and in Chicago and on stage and so forth. And he gets a call from his agent that they want him to try out for this really small part on this new show called Cheers. And he said he didn't really have high hopes for it. His agent said, it's a small role. It's one line. Actually, it's one word. The word was beer. And he says, I was having a hard time. I was right for the role of the guy who looked like he wanted a beer. So I went in and they said, nah, it's too small of a role. Why don't you read this other one? And it was the guy who never left the bar. And he was a kind of a sweet character, a little bit henpecked by his wife and so forth, and, liked to spend time with his friends at the bar. And when he'd walk in, they'd just say, Norm, and you would see Ted Danson roll a beer down to the end of the bar where George would catch it in his right hand and Norm would drink his beer. Came to time for the finale, which, again, yesterday he passed away at 76. It was the 32nd anniversary of the last episode of the show in which he had one of the last lines. And it's a big convoluted final show, type of thing where a lot of things happen in the final plot that you have to make the characters go in different directions. And Shelley Long came back, and she had been a long-time love interest off and on of Ted Danson, Sam Malone, and they fly off to Los Angeles for a honeymoon, and then he has second thoughts, and he comes back to the bar. And the last person to leave the bar, as all the regulars were there with John Ratzenberger and Woody Harrelson and all the others who made that show as great as it was for as long as it was on the air. 117 Emmy awards, Emmy nominations, 28 Emmy awards. This was the finale, which was watched by 80 million people. This final episode, which aired on this day or yesterday, 32 years ago, and it was in fact George Wendt as Norm who had the final scene with Ted Danson.
Well, Sammy, I love that stool. If there's a heaven, I don't want to go there unless my stool is waiting for me. And I'll tell you what, even God better not be on it. You wouldn't dare. I don't think it matters what you love, Sammy. Could be a person, could be a thing. As long as you love it totally, completely, without judgment.
You know what I think? I think you ought to go home and wake up Vera with a big kiss and then do what comes naturally.
Wake her up so she can watch me eat a bucket of buffalo wings?
Maybe not.
Well, I'm off. But, Sammy, can I let you in on a little secret?
Sure. I knew you'd come back. You did. You can never be unfaithful to your one true love. You always come back to her. Who is that? Think about it, Sam.
And we're kind of left wondering whether Sam and Diane eventually get together, which we never really knew. It was a great, great show, and he was a great, great part of it, and had, great wisecracks like, hey, Norm, how's a beer sound? He says, I don't know. I usually finish them before they get a word in. Those are the kind of things that he said. He did some other things after the show ended, but nothing to match that. He was in Harry's Law, The Ghost Whisperer. He did a lot of voiceover work, and actually in the show, we don't see his wife, Vera, but the voice is of his actual wife, Bernadette Burkett, who he met doing Second City, and we don't see her, but we hear her, and she survives him along with his children, Hillary, Joe, and Daniel, and his stepchildren, Joshua and Andrew. So rest in peace, George Wendt. I'm sorry. In that party, I said, hey, Norm, like a schmuck, but he gave people a lot of laughs in his life, and the skits of Da Bears, I associated more with him than Joe Montana. I just love to see him sitting there in his Jim McMahon jersey and just leading the group. That was great stuff. We're watching what's happening with this NCAA. It's called House versus NCAA, which they, I guess, hope to get things in order with what we have now, total chaos in college sports. I saw something the other day where they're expecting some teams to have payrolls up to $40 million this year, and this settlement is going to lead the way to have things like salary caps and so forth and so on. Now, according to ESPN's Pete Thamel, what they will do along with this settlement is something that they've needed to do for a long time, and they need a commissioner and someone to head up what they call the College Sports Commission to punish universities, athletic programs, and individuals for rules violations. Because right now, it's anarchy. There are no rules. Or if there are rules, nobody is following them. So this will be a way for, I guess, to have some type of control over college sports, though we're still in very new territory on this. According to Thamel, the expectation is the CEO will likely come from outside college athletics, is not expected to be a household name, or will he be experienced in either coaching or administration? That would rule out the name that people seem to like the most, and that's Nick Saban. Most think that Nick Saban would be an ideal candidate for that. I think at the age of 73 or 74, whatever he is, that's unlikely. Though he's good at everything he does. He just won an Emmy as a studio analyst for college football, what he did on game day. They had the sports Emmys last night. I believe PTI won another one, and Scott Van Pelt finally won one. Mazel tov to him. Kirk Ferentz, coach at Iowa, quoted here. He says, we still have no idea what the rules are for August. He says, think about that for a second. College football is fairly significant. It's a big operation, a lot of revenue. They all talk. It's all talk. They talk about revenue, a lot at stake here. We still don't know what the rules are. It just shows you how screwed up things are. Yeah. So even if they have somebody to enforce the rules, they got to figure out what the rules are. And nobody seems to know at this point. So there we go. All right, Orioles preview coming up in the next hour. Also, Mike Elias, the general manager of the team, finally talked to the media last night, 4 days after he fired Brandon Hyde as manager, which hasn't done any good since the firing. Orioles are 0-4, and they are riding an 8-game winless streak as they head into today's series finale at Milwaukee. We'll have the game for you here coming up at 12:30. But up next, we'll get to what Marjorie Harris said about the Washington Commanders off one really successful season. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. Oh, is Reggie Miller an interesting figure in the history of New York City basketball, which is a rich history, not just for college basketball with St. John's, incredible high school basketball played in New York City, the New York Knicks of the early 1970s with Willis Reed limping out of the tunnel and beating the Los Angeles Lakers. But the battles that Reggie Miller and the Pacers had with the Knicks in the 90s, they are legendary. And maybe they're forgotten by a lot of younger people, but Reggie's going to be courtside broadcasting the game tonight for TNT, which is going to make for some interesting listening. He was in Central Park yesterday, and we'll play the reaction to that coming up shortly. Also, Orioles preview coming up at 10:30. Jeff Arnold, one of the broadcasters for the team, he was due to join us at 10:30. We pushed that to 10:45, which is fine because I'll be able to go through what Mike Elias said yesterday, talking to the media about the firing of Brandon Hyde. We'll get to that coming up at 10:30. But I don't know where this was. Maybe it was the other day. Marjorie Harris, who's the wife of Josh Harris, the owner of the Commanders, was at some type of an event, and there were microphones in front of her. And look, when Dan Snyder owned the team, we heard more from Tanya Snyder than we did from Dan Snyder. Well, we hear on a fairly regular basis from Josh Harris. He talks to the media, has a couple of news conferences every year. If you catch him on the sidelines, he doesn't mind talking to cameras. He was part of the news conference to announce, of course, the deal between the city and the team to build the stadium at the RFK site. Hopefully it gets approved by the city council. He's accessible. And usually the owner's wife takes an active role in charities for the team, and Marjorie Harris has done that. She's involved as the chairman of the Commanders Foundation, and she's got experience, of course, with other teams. Josh Harris has owned the 76ers and the Devils for some time, so she knows what this is about. I don't know if she's local. I don't know if she's from this area. Josh Harris certainly is and understands what America's team means. And I have a real understanding of it, having worked in Dallas not long after they became known as America's team. And the nation got to know them as America's team off of the Super Bowl video. Remember, the Cowboys made the Super Bowl after the 78 season, and they beat the Denver Broncos in New Orleans. And every year, NFL Films, among other things, would produce the Super Bowl highlights video. And around Super Bowl Sunday, you can watch the NFL Network as they do these marathon shows of all the highlights of the Super Bowl. So if you happen to catch that one, I think that's the first national reference to America's team. And remember, they had the helmets, and they still wear them from time to time, where the stripes at the top are not just blue and white, they're red, white, and blue. There was nobody more All-American, anyway, in fact, they would call him Captain America, than Roger Staubach. He's not just one of the great quarterbacks in the history of the NFL. He's one of the great Americans. He won the Heisman Trophy at Navy. He served in Vietnam. He was the quarterback of the Cowboys. Love him or hate him, he was a great, great, great player. And then he went on to incredible success in business, in commercial real estate, and employed some of his teammates. And, he took care of a lot of people like Charlie Waters, who had lost his son. And as he tells it, Roger Staubach called him. He says, I don't care what you do, whether you sit in your office all day or do nothing, you're coming to my company. And he says, save my life. That's the kind of person he is. So as Captain America, I admire him greatly. I respect Roger Staubach a lot. And so this America's team thing was part of the marketing of the team. And nobody marketed the Dallas Cowboys better than Tex Schramm. When you look at organizations and how they're built, the Cowboys were the team that everybody aspired to be because they did it the right way. They were an expansion team in 1960, predictably bad at the beginning, but they had structure to make them a contending team within 5 years. And that was harder to do in those days because they didn't have free agency. And when you had the expansion draft as an expansion team, teams were allowed to protect more players because there were fewer players on the team. Right? You only had 43-man rosters or something like that, or 40-man roster. I think there were 40-man rosters. So, each team was allowed to protect 6 or 7 players or something like that. Or no, except for 6 or 7. So exposes only 6 or 7 players. So the Cowboys weren't very good when they started. And they became really good because of the structure of Tex Schramm as the team president, which included marketing. He had come from that kind of work with Pete Rozelle with the Rams. Rozelle became commissioner, and Schramm became president of the Cowboys in the same year. They had Gil Brandt, and nobody had a person like this, the head of player personnel. He was the guy who studied the draft. He used the computer. This was a brand new thing. He used a computer to feed information of the players into it, and that would help them to determine who to draft and who to pick in free agency, and they had great success with that. And then Tom Landry, the great coach of the team. And Landry did everything. He was the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, and the head coach. And they were always one of the most successful teams in the NFL. And so the America's team was earned. It really was. You know, they were always in the playoff hunt. They were always in the big games. We saw them on Thanksgiving every year. I think that started in 1966. So the America's team has been a part of their identity for 60 years, right? Close to that. So this is what Marjorie Harris said at this event recently. You know, it's been announced that Washington will host the draft in 2027. And I think she went a little bit too far.
We have so much to look forward to. And look, the Commanders are America's team. And so what better place to have the NFL draft than in the mall?
Well, they're not really America's team. They are in the nation's capital, and they were really, really good last year. But the name is still controversial, you know, whether you agree that it should have been changed or not. It's still a hot button. You can still get people fired up. Hey, are they ever going to go back to the Redskins? No, they're not going back to the Redskins. They've said that. Josh Harris has said we're not changing the name again. We're moving forward as the Commanders. So I would say when the wife of the owner says we're America's team, no, I think you really should hesitate on saying something like that. Only 1 year removed from being a 4-win team. I know they won 12 last year. I know they made it to the NFC Championship game, but things can be fleeting. See the Baltimore Orioles, who 2 years ago were the model franchise for baseball and now are a mess. So let's pump the brakes a little bit on that. And, you know, you've got fans it's all over football now. And really, the Cowboys, at least for national television, although they beyond their record, which, you know, their record was not good, but they're still on all the time because people watch. Kansas City has really, at least for now, become America's team. They got the best quarterback in the league. They've been to 3 straight Super Bowls, winning 2 of them. They're on every national TV game conceivable. They play, I think last year they played every day of the week, right? They played Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or maybe didn't play Tuesday. I don't know, whatever it was. But I would say, Marjorie Harris, you know, God love your husband, God love your family. You've done great things with this organization. But declaring them America's team at this point in time, I think is a little bit early. I think you might want to back off that a little bit. And I wonder if Dan Quinn will even be asked about this. And if he is, he's not going to say, gee, I wish you wouldn't have said that. But I know that Joe Gibbs would not have liked that. He would not have liked his team being declared America's team when he's got to play Dallas at least twice a year. All right, Reggie Miller, courtside tonight with the TNT crew, broadcasting Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals as the Knicks take on the Indiana Pacers. And the history between these two teams, going back to the 90s, incredible. They met 6 times between 1993 and 2000 in the playoffs. And the famous choke sign, you see this pop up from time to time, where Reggie Miller gives the choke sign to who's the guy that did Do the Right Stuff. You know, he gives the choke sign after he scored to Spike Lee after he scored 39 points in Game 5 of the final of the Eastern Conference Finals in '94. He had 25 points in the fourth quarter. Unfortunately for Reggie and the Pacers, they lost the next 2, and the Knicks moved on to the finals and lost to the Houston Rockets. But that set the stage for the following year on May 7th of '95, so just about 30 years ago. Reggie Miller scored 8 points in 9 seconds with the Pacers down 105-89 with 18.9 seconds to go. And that is his signature moment at Madison Square Garden. So when he gets back to New York, the reaction is kind of interesting. And Reggie kind of put it to the test yesterday. He was hanging out in Central Park and shot a little video of himself as he was interacting with New York fans.
I live rent-free in a lot of New Yorkers' heads, so yes, they're still mad. But as you see, people are just casually walking by. running by. No one's going to say anything. We'll see. First one. How you doing, my friend? Good career. Thank you, sir. First one, Reggie Miller. He said good career. Okay, that's one. That's one. Yes. Reggie Miller. I am. We're doing it live here. We wanted to see if anyone would say, are you Reggie Miller? Can I see your eyes? Do you mind? I really am. Can I see your eyes? You were part of some of my favorite basketball. Come over here so I can put you on that. Go ahead. This man was part of some of my favorite basketball growing up. Just an absolute. No, he was the main one that was saying Reggie sucks. He was one of the main ones. But you were amazing. True New Yorker. You were amazing. See, I love the honesty. That's why I have a love-hate relationship with New York, because they keep it real and they're true. True. You are one of the best competitors I've ever seen in any sport. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Such an honor to meet you. Very kind. Thank you, sir. Enjoy your day. You too. Thank you. Isn't that great? Isn't that nice?
Let me just dap you up. I'll leave you alone, Reggie.
Thank you, brother.
See? It's good to see you, man.
Nice. See, I'm all right around here. See? Yeah, so they may hate Reggie, and they'll boo him tonight for sure at Madison Square Garden, but when he's out and about among the people, they treat him well. So that's Reggie Miller yesterday in Central Park. A little bit of baseball. We had something odd last night in Boston. Walker Buehler, who had been on the 15-day injured list, came back to start last night against the New York Mets and was doing well until he was ejected in the third inning for arguing balls and strikes. After 2 balls to open the at-bat by Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor stole second, and following the slide, Buehler approached plate umpire Mike Easterbrook while yelling and pointing his finger. He was quickly ejected, and then his manager, who came out to defend him, Alex Cora, he got tossed as well. And the Red Sox, fortunately for Buehler, went on to win the game, but this was something that I heard the play-by-play call that was clearly an egregious call of a ball, should have been a strike. And the umpiring crew chief told reporters after the game that Buehler was tossed because he stepped off the mound toward Easterbrook to argue the call. He said he can say stuff from the mound, but once he comes off the mound, he's leaving his position to argue balls and strikes. Once anybody leaves their position to argue balls and strikes, that's an immediate ejection, which, brings up the question of, could they have the challenge system in place sooner rather than later in baseball? Not this year, but they tested it in spring training. If they had that, then they would have been able to contest the call, and you get an instant reaction. It's not like you have to wait. And it's changed tennis completely. And I think that along the way, it's probably going to change things for baseball once they implement it. They're also experimenting with something else, and that's the challenge of the check swing. This was Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI on that subject.
Starting today, baseball will experiment with an automatic Hawkeye system that will allow challenges to check swing calls. This will begin in single-A minor league ball. The tipping point is whether the head of the bat is at least 45 degrees ahead of the knob. Each team gets 1 challenge per game, 1, but if the challenge is successful, they get another, and on and on. Wilbon, big deal, little deal, no deal.
No deal. I tried to muster up some emotion for this, and I can't. I don't care. First of all, you can go a whole game, or probably 2 games in a row, and not get a check swing. Not for a third strike anyway. So, I'm sorry, I can't get excited about every little thing baseball does where they want to introduce technology. And by the way, I'm not against it. I'm not against the introduction of technology, but don't ask me to care. You care about this?
I do.
Why?
Let me say, I'll explain it. I think it could be a very big deal, especially on a 3-2 count with the bases loaded. Okay, I think that the check swing is in the fabric of every at-bat. I am one of those people who likes to look at the first base ump or the third base ump to see if they go like this, okay? And especially on a 2-strike situation. What amazed me,
You can still.
What amazed me today was I found out that there is no written definition
of what the check swing is.
Yes,
that's why this is not a big deal.
I didn't know that. It's absolutely up to the umpire discretion.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that will all be settled. Now we'll have a definition. Now we'll have something that we can pay attention to.
The 45-degree angle, really?
Yeah. Wait, do you like it in tennis? Do you like when they show
I like the Hawkeye. That's different. The thing is either in or out. And this is still judgment, 45-degree angle. By the way, let's get to something more important in the remaining seconds we have left, Mr. English Major.
Yeah.
Is it check, swing, or checked ED swing?
I think that depends on the time and place. I think the active motion is to check a swing. I think when you look back on it, it is a checked swing. So I think there's probably two different words, slightly different definitions. We will see it, not next year. Next year it'll go to the majors in spring training. The year after, we're going to see it. And I like it. I like it in this regard, Mike. I like it if everyone can see it and there's transparency to it and it's quick, bang, bang.
So what I got to have? I got to have an isosceles triangle on the screen?
I want to see it quick.
Really?
Here's what I don't like.
What?
I don't like how long it takes to find the spot of where the football should be on the line of scrimmage. And I don't like how long it takes to see if it's a flagrant one. Those things take forever.
Flagrant one is way worse than the spot on a field.
Takes forever.
Flagrant one.
If it's bang, bang, I'm not liking.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be on the pitch challenge. The batter can tap his hat or helmet, and the pitcher, I guess, can do the same thing, and it's supposed to be instant. It goes right into the ear of the umpire. And they can move this technology along. They could do it in football, too. I agree with Tony. It does take too long to spot the football, and the replay was supposed to take no longer than 90 seconds. It always takes longer than that. But the technology is there. Use it. It's changed tennis. How different would John McEnroe's career be if they had Questek when he played? Totally different. And he might not have lost his cool as much as he did. He might have even had a better career. He wouldn't have the identity that he has now, but it would have probably helped his career if in fact they had that technology in use. Back to football. Albert Breer on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday. We talked a lot about the story about Caleb Williams, which came out last week as part of a book that Seth Wickersham wrote about quarterbacks, that he and his dad perhaps were looking to blow up the draft, find a way not to go to the Bears. And then he said when he was there, the coach's staff didn't teach him how to watch film. Both the offensive coordinator and the coach were fired before the end of the season. Just an absolute mess. Where do they go from here? This was Breer on that yesterday with Patrick.
It's a tough look for Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron and the guys who were on the staff last year. I mean, it sucks because I think for those guys, they're going to have to answer those questions now. Like, if they have to interview for another job, what do you think the first question is going to be? You mean you didn't have your quarterback learning how to watch film? What was going on there? So there could be some effect there. I don't think it's going to have an effect on the new staff because Ben Johnson wasn't there for that, obviously. And then the second piece of it, I think it's just kind of where we're at with pro athletes right now. And I think it's notable, too, because we talked about this with Marvin Harrison last year, right? And Marvin Harrison handled his pre-draft process so differently than almost any other athlete we've seen, in that he very much limited the teams he was going to meet with extensensively beyond just the combine. He didn't take a physical at the combine, which was a little out of whack, right? As far as a lot of NFL people saw it, but he's like, if I'm going to be a top 5 pick, why do I want to give the other 27 teams my medical information? And then he also didn't work out for the larger group. So, and he had asked teams do you need me to work out? And they said no to him. And really the overarching thing with Marvin there was he handled the entire thing like a business proposition. Why is that relevant with Marvin and Caleb Williams? Well, because they were the first high school class to enter college in the NIL era. So these guys have legitimately been businessmen since they were 18 years old. It's the first group that came out of high school into the NIL era. I thought that was notable with Marvin, and I think it's notable here with Caleb. Caleb asked these big picture questions that guys 10, 15, 20 years ago may not have asked, and I think it's part of what this generation of athlete is going to be. They're entering the league with money in their pocket. They have some leverage because of it, and they've had the chance to kind of write their ticket right up until they enter the NFL. And so, I think for Caleb, it was kind of what we've seen about him resisting going to Chicago was part of a bigger picture thing, which is I'm handling my business affairs like they're business affairs. This is big business, and I'm going to treat it as such. And and even though he didn't go through with it, the fact that he just explored it, I think, is a precursor to more guys handling their pre-draft process this way because they're more prepared to based on what they went through in college.
Well, how surprised are you that somebody hasn't pulled in Eli Manning?
He's
coming in the driveway.
Oop, meant to edit this out. Excuse me. There we go.
It's surprising, but like how many guys really have the leverage to do it? You know what I mean? Like how many guys are that level? I mean, Caleb was seen as on the level of Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck, and that's probably it, over the last 20 years. So there aren't a ton of guys who have the leverage to pull it off.
What about Arch Manning?
He might, yeah. I mean, like, and we'll see, right? Like, because I don't know if Arch is going to come out like after next year. I think you and I think you'd agree with me in this, right? Like, based on the family history, I think he's probably going to spend at least 2 more years at Texas. Would be my guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, he certainly could do that. Like where.
But he's going to get an idea where he could go if he is legitimate.
And he's got to play well. Obviously, let's establish that first. Too.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's got.
But let's say the Saints are right there with the number 1 pick.
Right.
Would then that help him with his decision that maybe there is a best case scenario? I would come out to play for my hometown. If not, then I'm going to stay and play 1 more year.
I mean, well, that's what Peyton did, right? Because Peyton knew
Peyton was going to the Jets.
Jets, yeah, with Parcells there, and he decided not to do it, right? Like, so, like, I think Peyton had, I would argue Peyton had that sort of decision on the table in 1997 when he decided to go back to Tennessee. I mean, that's the ultimate sliding door situation, like scenario, by the way. Like, what would have happened? Peyton Manning went to the Jets. Like, then does Bill Belichick stay in New York? You know what I mean? Like, because he was lined up to be Parcells' successor. Like, how many things are different if Peyton Manning comes out in 97? But yeah, I mean, I think that like he'll certainly, I would think based on how everything's been handled over the years with that family, that they will weigh everything. Now, I think the interesting part about the decision that Arch would have to make if he plays at that level this year would be the history of quarterbacks that only start 1 year is not very good. Only start 1 year as collegians. There's this some teams look at it as like this threshold that you have to get past is 25 starts, right? You want to have 25 starts in college, and the history of guys who have more than 25 starts is much better than guys who don't. Arch isn't going to be there at the end of this year. He'll be short of that at the end of this year. So how beneficial does how good does the situation that the NFL team's presenting that has the number 1 pick, if he plays that well, how good does that situation have to be to supersede what might statistically be best for his development? I think those are the sorts of questions you'd be asking. And I think they'd be asking those questions too.
That's Albert Breer of the NFL Network and SI.com, I believe, Monday Morning Quarterback. And I love that part where he talks about if Peyton Manning had decided to come out after his junior year at Tennessee and would have been drafted number one by the New York Jets with Bill Parcells. One was they had a team that got to the AFC Championship game without him. Could they have gotten to the Super Bowl with a young Peyton Manning? I mean, he had a lot of developing to do. I mean, he had growing pains with the Colts even after staying for his senior year with 28 interceptions as a rookie. But he was on his way to being one of the great quarterbacks. And would Bill Belichick have left the Jets to go to the Patriots if he had Peyton Manning? And then what happens with Tom Brady with either Pete Carroll if he stays or some other coach that they hire, and the whole Brady-Belichick thing maybe doesn't happen. I mean, it's just so many dominoes. Maybe Pete Carroll doesn't wind up going to USC and having those teams with Leinart and Bush and all that. I mean, it's just so many different things that would have been different or possibly different if Peyton Manning had come out. And maybe he even looked at the Jets and said, because the Jets, I think, went 1-15 his junior year and just didn't want to go there. So that may have played a factor as well. But it's just always fun to look at those things and say, man, what if? What would have happened if so-and-so hadn't done what so-and-so did? And I love those kind of stories. But as far as where Caleb Williams goes, he's got the coaching staff he wants. Maybe it'll work out for him with the Bears. We'll see. They're coming here in mid-October to run it back from the Hail Mary game, and we'll see where that goes. We got Orioles preview coming up next. Jeff Arnold will join us, one of the voices of the team. Also, we'll go through what Mike Elias said last night in his news conference, finally addressing the firing of Brandon Hyde. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.